I say that life as a man is exceptionally difficult. I say the most beautiful and the most terrifying thing about being a man is you're born without value. Society doesn't care about you. You're only going to be cared about based on how useful you are.
Is this real? Not like, is this AI generated? I mean, is this what men really feel? And more importantly, is it true? Hello there, and welcome back to the channel. In one of my previous videos, I discussed the repercussions that OnlyFans and simp culture have on men. One of them is young men joining the somewhat new movement of men's rights activism. I highly recommend you check out that video beforehand to get the full grasp of everything I'll be talking about here, but I'll mention a lot of parallels later in this video as well. There will be a lot I discuss in this video, including statistics, references, and my opinions on the matter. To be honest, it can get pretty confusing, and I found it a bit hard myself to organize everything. So, let's just start at the beginning. The story for us begins in the early 1970s. With second wave feminism being well established, scholars began studying feminist ideas. Many of these scholars argued that the patriarchy hurt men as much as women, as it confined them to a specific idea of what masculinity is. The shift to focus specifically on men was influenced by Warren Farrell, who in his book The Myth of Male Power emphasizes how men are told to suppress emotion and how this ultimately hurts men. But as we get into the 80s and 90s, the idea of focusing on how men also suffer in the system quickly shifts to how men are an oppressed class. There's a lot this encompasses, so I won't get into the nitty-gritty here. But this idea of men being oppressed only exponentially grew as the internet became widely accessible. Websites like A Voice for Men and Men Going Their Own Way are some of the most influential. The Matrix is often used as an allegory for men, quote-unquote, waking up and seeing society for how it truly is. Remember that imagery for later. Now, I'll explain what exactly drives men to these communities in a bit, but a huge problem I've seen is that a lot of the people running these organizations are basically scamming broken men. Because when a person becomes radicalized into an ideology, it is very easy for those in power to manipulate them, especially for money. Now, I won't be making any specific allegations in this video, but if you've seen anything by CopyZilla, you'll know the crowd of people I'm talking about. Before I discuss the people running these organizations though, I want to discuss how men join these communities in the first place, because I think that's the root of the issue here. I'll be using Kingpin and Bullseye from Daredevil to better illustrate my point. Spoilers for Daredevil Season 3. Benjamin Poindexter was always a troubled kid. His parents died when he was young, and what little they taught him was about anger rather than ethics or morality. His therapist, Eileen Mercer, believed he had several mental health issues, largely because Poindexter was alone his entire life, never knowing the difference between right and wrong. Right before her early death to cancer, she told young Dex to find structures or a person to guide him.
Your internal compass isn't broken, Dex. It just works better when you have the North Star to guide you.
So, Dex did. He joined the army, worked at a suicide prevention center, and eventually got a job in the FBI. But what happens when the very structures you rely on turn on you? During a prison transfer of Wilson Fisk, the Albanian syndicate ambushed the FBI and almost murdered Fisk. Dex intervened and murked the gang members. But facing public backlash against this situation, the FBI needed a scapegoat. So they blamed Dex and essentially fired him, leaving him alone and without money. A burden that many men feel society has placed on them is finding a career. Having a job that makes you a lot of money is what society views as being successful. Of course, unless you're in the top 1%, this isn't very easy. If anything, the odds are stacked against you. The basic qualifications for most jobs now require you to have a college degree and 2 to 3 years of experience in your field. But going to college is really expensive, with the very likely probability that you'll be in student loan debt for years. And it's pretty hard to gain experience in a field when you have no experience coming right out of college. Essentially, finding a job becomes your job, and it takes up a lot of time. And things get worse when you consider how expensive everything's become. You have to pay for food, gas, taxes, things to fix in your house, Now, sure, one could stay with their families until they can provide for themselves, but this is under the assumption they have a healthy and stable relationship with those people. If you're poor or alone, it's going to be hard to focus all your energy on finding a good paying job when you're more worried about making ends meet. So, with the notion that men must be the provider for their family, I can see a lot of young men struggling with their career, trying to find a way out through less than ideal means. Benjamin Poindexter met Julie Barnes at the Suicide Prevention Center. After seeing her kind personality, he believed she was his North Star, and he took a liking to her. Dex began stalking her, figuring out everything he could about her. He musters up the courage to ask her out. They go out to dinner, and things seemingly go well at first. But at some point, Dex brings up some things Julie never told about him. Not truly understanding social cues, he ends up doubling down. Julie, understandably, becomes very uncomfortable and leaves him. While this particular situation isn't romantic, I think it perfectly displays a lot of interactions men have with women now. Like I mentioned in my OnlyFans video, modern dating life can be particularly hard for men. There isn't a clear way to do it, and like having a job, if you seem inexperienced or shy, you'll often get rejected. And let's keep it a buck 50 here. Whether it's for social or biological reasons, women often reject men who don't give Giga Chad energy. Maybe it's because she wants to start a stable family or wants adventure. I'm not necessarily saying it's right or fair, but no matter what some feminists say, a lot of women want a guy who has a stable job, is physically fit, and has whatever they define as a good personality. And that's not just some random conclusion I've come to. That's based on my own personal experience of talking to my female friends, as well as kind of trying out the dating sphere. So I can certainly understand how it would be confusing to a guy who hears men have to be more emotional, or stop toxic masculinity, while at the same time hearing, I don't want to be with a guy who cries, or I'll never date a short guy. This just leaves young men confused, and for many, they begin blaming women for not understanding who they are. Out of a job and ruining his chances with Julie, Dex goes through a mental breakdown. On the brink of tears, he listens to the recordings he had with his therapist.
It's good to see you, Dex. How was your week? I'm scared, Dr. Mercer. Scared? What's making you scared?
Mercer makes him believe he still has a chance to turn everything around and bring structure back into his life. He goes back to Julie and apologizes for his actions. He tells her he's lost his job, has no family, and is in real emotional need. Being the kind person she is, Julie begrudgingly decides she'll help him. By this point, Wilson Fisk has studied Poindexter's entire life, and he knows that Julie would be Dex's North Star to guide him. But knowing he could use Dex against Daredevil, Kingpin sends men to kill Julie. Dex is under the guise that Julie completely blocked him and wants nothing to do with him. He is now truly alone. As it is, mental health services are still a long way from being destigmatized and affordable. But in my opinion, this is even harder for men. Throughout our lives, we're told we cannot cry, to push through any situation without complaint, and if we work hard enough, we'll make it to the top. You must have the best shaped body that helps you with that grind set, and if you aren't in some form of romantic or sexual situation, you are seen as less than. When men are constantly bombarded with these ideals they are supposed to live up to, they'll start to feel like failures if they don't meet one of these expectations. Because while the idea that everyone can be successful is nice, that's unfortunately not how the world works. And because men aren't supposed to cry or share their emotions, a lot of fear, anger, and despair is going to build up inside of them. This is going to cause a dip in their mental health, and even if mental health services were more widely available for men, they likely wouldn't even seek it due to the strict attitude of keeping up appearances. And sure, maybe mental health services should be more focused on those who really need it the most, and people should mostly just rely on the people around them. But that assumes many men have meaningful relationships they can turn to. One study by the Cigna Group suggests about 60% of men and women reported being lonely, and 79% of young adults reported feeling lonely as well. Another study by the American Survey Center says that in 2021, 15% of men reported having no close friends. All of this indicates that young men, especially those in their teen years, are in real need of connection and are extremely susceptible to people who don't have their best interests. While Poindexter was still working at the FBI, Fisk would thank Dex for saving his life and occasionally talk to him. Kingpin began empathizing with Dex about his past. At first, Poindexter ignored Fisk as he knows he's a criminal and a manipulator. But as Dex's life crumbled before him, he soon had no one to talk to, no purpose. Believing he was the problem, Poindexter attempts to take his own life.
See how alone you are? If you were to press
You were taught to hide beneath many fictions. You fashioned yourself into something the world would tolerate. Julie never would have understood you. And society won't either. It punishes people like you, like us.
With these words, Dex now solidifies his trust to Kingpin. He is the only person who seems to care about him or speak about his issues. Through gradual manipulation, Kingpin now holds the role of a twisted father figure for Dex. Benjamin Poindexter died, and Bullseye was born. Just as Palpatine manipulated Anakin, just as Ozai manipulated Zuko, just as the powerful today manipulate young men. When men feel insecure about themselves, they begin to seek answers by people confident enough to say they know the way.
Pay to play. These guys are spending 3 days with me. I'll never forget, these guys paid $12,000 each to sit in that chair.
Teens are especially vulnerable to this behavior. Their minds haven't fully developed, so they are more susceptible to manipulation. Several studies show that anywhere from 30 to 50% of young men have a positive view of Andrew Tate, who's probably the most famous version of Kingpin today. And one study by Savanta suggests that a third of young men see him as a role model. I did a bit of research among some young men on what they thought of Andrew Tate, and while this isn't verbatim, this was the general consensus. Some of his advice goes too far, and his motivations seem iffy. He is also very materialistic, but he says a lot of hard truths about society or reality that not many people say or want to hear. And he also gives good advice on self-improvement. So a bit in the middle here, though definitely much more positively than the media. The media often calls out men who support these men's rights groups, calling them misogynist or alt-right, even if they make good points about how society functions. And I think a lot of people get confused as to why men join these groups. But can you really blame those men though? We live in a society that seems to increasingly hate men. We see it in the media, taught in university classrooms, in entertainment. So when someone comes and actively stands up for men's issues, a lot of men are going to support them, or at the very least, sympathize with them. And this is sort of a side tangent, but I've gotten really tired of Hollywood movies or actors saying really dumb stuff against men.
The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There is a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird. We have a different approach to what I'm sure a lot of people will assume is a love story just because, like, we cast a guy in the movie.
Right.
Andrew Burnap, great dude.
Yeah.
All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby.
To me, it's borderline propaganda. And if we keep it $1.50, until recently, the majority of fans of many popular franchises were men. Remember, it wasn't that long ago that a lot of women believed liking superheroes or Star Wars was weird.
In fact, I personally think it's awesome to see women love Star Wars and other similar properties. Hell, my sister was a huge Star Wars fan growing up, and still is. I still go to see all the new movies with her. My fiance loves Star Wars and all things fantasy and science fiction, and every day of my life I am so very thankful and grateful to have met a woman like her. And both of them will tell you that growing up, there was a stigma around girls who liked these sort of things, that like Star Wars or science fiction or fantasy or whatever else it might be.
Like, I remember a lot of girls sort of mocking me back in middle school and high school for enjoying Star Wars. So with men seeing big portions of society hate them, even if they haven't personally done anything wrong, I can see why they get frustrated when they're told, lower the toxic masculinity, stop mansplaining, or you're just sexist for hating She-Hulk. And I'll end this section off with some stuff the channel Thor Skywalker has said.
And go ahead and say who cares if men are upset by any or all of this. They deserve it, or worse yet, be happy about it. And then take a look in the mirror and you'll see someone who is part of the problem, not solution. Because people interested in actual peace or solutions will look at and try to understand where the other side is coming from, and that certainly goes both ways here.
I get called Morpheus a lot. We are living inside of the Matrix, and I am Morpheus.
Does this sound familiar? The Matrix is often used as an allegory for man, quote-unquote, waking up and seeing society for how it truly is. So, a man who believes in the idea that he's freed himself from society or male oppression says they have taken the red pill, much like Neo does in the Matrix. Going further, someone who believes they have no chance being with women has taken the black pill, or is involuntarily celibate, hence the term incel. This is either because they are low income or too unattractive to be with someone. And I think this line of thinking, whether financial or romantic, can get some guys feeling a lot of despair. At this point, a guy looking for financial or romantic advice has probably run into a website or influencer who claims to have all the answers. Someone who feels desperate or perhaps is sheltered will likely research them further, slowly falling into the belief that this guru can lead them to success, especially when that influencer tells a story about how they went from rags to riches.
Elon Musk was not a baller his whole life.
And after I get fired, I almost get evicted and end up homeless.
The problem isn't necessarily the dumb advice these influencers give, though some of it can be dangerous. The problem is that these influencers use the desperation of men for profit. They use clever marketing tactics to make men fall victim to scams and predatory programs. I'm going to list a few programs and communities that fall within men's rights activism. But before I do that, I want to emphasize that not everything I'm about to mention is a scam, at least legally. The point isn't really to say which specifically are scams or predatory, because regardless of that, a lot of these groups do preach dangerous things, specifically against women. And besides that, the point of these programs is more to make money off of desperate men rather than trying to help them. Let's start with men going their own way. As I touched upon in one of my last videos, when a guy becomes tired of interacting with women in real life, he'll either go to online sites that get straight to the point, or he'll take on the philosophy of men going their own way. A man who follows this philosophy believes the only way he can be his best self is by completely separating himself from women, or at the very least, the pursuit of romantic relationships. He rejects social norms and focuses on his well-being. It's sort of the whole Sigma male thing. Some more extreme believers of this lifestyle say that feminism has corrupted society. These extremists will likely avoid interacting with women or feminists at all costs. Another direction men go to for romantic peace is seeking pickup artists. These people will offer courses for guys to quote-unquote better understand women. But this goes south pretty quickly, because not only are these pickup artists likely scamming men for bad information, but it's usually pretty dangerous. A lot of the rhetoric they use objectifies women, and the goal usually becomes to sleep with as many women as possible, especially through manipulation.
So when it's all said and done, prepare to have 20 to 30 beautiful women you get to select from, like a dollar menu at McDonald's.
I'm not so sure you want to be taking this guy's advice, you know?
There's also allegedly been criminal history with some of these guys, with some people accusing some of these pickup artists with rape. There's a great video by Maccabee Storytelling that goes a lot more in depth on modern dating for men and his personal experience with the pickup artist community. I highly recommend you watch that after this. Link in the description. This leads me to Hustlers University, which is Andrew Tate's course for men. It's $50 a month for access to a Discord server. It gives you access to some people who give you financial information. From what I hear, a lot of it is pretty basic stuff, and you can search for that stuff for free on YouTube. But more importantly is the PhD or Pimpin' Hose degree. It's deleted now, but there were some very weird things he'd say about women and how to get them, quote unquote. He often stereotypes women about what they like and how they act, and one method he teaches is essentially lying about your lifestyle in order to get laid. In my opinion, any relationship that starts with a lie is doomed from the start, and I think in the long run, that's pretty stupid advice. While Hustlers University is arguably the most famous of these programs, there's a lot of influencers who offer these types of programs, whether it be financial advice, romantic help, crypto. There's so many influencers now who see this as easy money and just take it. And it's terrible because the men buying these programs are desperate for money or a connection, and rather than someone who actually helps them, they're instead subjected to paying tons of money for programs that at the very best are superficial, but at worst, scams. Bullseye has become Kingpin's executioner. As Daredevil tries his best to stop Fisk, Bullseye comes in to stop him. There's almost no line that Bullseye will cross in order to help Fisk, but his loyalty wouldn't last forever. After some investigation by Matt Murdock, Daredevil uncovered that Kingpin had killed Julie Barnes. Hearing this, Bullseye hits another breaking point. Sad, angry, but most importantly, betrayed. At this point, Kingpin has completely taken over the FBI, is essentially a free man, and he is about to get away a happily married person. He has everything, while Bullseye is still a broken man who will likely be caught by the police and put in a cell for the rest of his life. So, in a crazy season finale, Daredevil, Bullseye, and Kingpin finally come together to brawl it out. Luckily for that timeline, Daredevil defeats Kingpin and Fisk is put back in bars. The sad reality is that many of the Kingpins of our time will never face justice for their crimes. There's so much power and money, they're practically invincible. Whether or not these are scams, I believe a lot of these programs not only influence harm and discrimination against women, but it leaves these men in the same place they started. Because these groups don't seem to provide real community or help. And when men don't see success with money or their romantic life, the cycle begins again. It becomes a never-ending loop. So we go back to Andrew Tate's original claim.
I say that life as a man is exceptionally difficult. I say the most beautiful and the most terrifying thing about being a man is you're born without value. Society doesn't care about you. You're only going to be cared about based on how useful you are.
And see, this is what a lot of these gurus get wrong. Maybe men believe they are undervalued in our society, or perhaps there are things inherently unfair that happen against men. But every single person has inherent value. You don't need to reach a certain tax bracket or pay for someone's course to be important. If you want to be somewhere, you'll have to work for it, sure, but putting all your time into how much money you make or how many women you sleep with ultimately won't lead to a fruitful life. Having meaningful relationships with others, sharing your hobbies with friends, helping those in need, these are the things I believe lead to a meaningful life. Because in the end, no matter how much money you made or how many women you seduced, we all die. The only thing that matters after that is our legacy, whether we made a positive difference in someone's life or if we wasted it on selfish wants. I've put some links in the description for some of the articles and videos I mentioned, as well as some resources for those who might need it. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.